Hi everybody, my name is Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I host two podcasts, SeizeYourBusiness.com, which deals with business issues and ways to make your business better, and I also host LearnAboutLaw.com, which deals with all sorts of different legal issues and educating lay people on what they need to know about the law. Today we're going to do a joint podcast between the two because I'm going to be talking about corporations versus LLCs and which form is the right form for your business. So if you want to check out SeizeYourBusiness.com, you just go to SeizeYourBusiness.com and we're on iTunes, and you can see our video blog and listen to our podcast there. If you want to check out LearnAboutLaw.com, go to learn-about-law.com. And we have video blogs, podcasts, and articles, a lot of blog articles about different legal issues that you need to be aware of as a layperson. So without further ado, I'm going to start talking about corporations versus LLCs and which corporate form is right for you. To lay the foundation, I want to talk about the difference between operating as a sole proprietorship, meaning you haven't incorporated at all, and incorporating either as a corporation or an LLC, and what the benefits of incorporating are. There's two primary benefits to incorporating. One is liability protection and the other is tax benefits. So I'll cover liability protection first. So the reason most people incorporate is to protect their personal assets from business debts. So if you're a corporation and your business accrues a lot of debt or gets sued, as long as you haven't personally guaranteed anything, your creditors can only go after corporate assets and they won't be able to come after your personal assets like your home or other businesses that you own in a different corporate form. So, for example, people who flip houses or real estate investors, they'll often have each real estate project in a separate corporation so that if someone slips and falls at their property and sues them, they can fold up that corporation and not affect their personal assets or their other corporate assets. So it's a liability shield, first and foremost. But the other benefit for people who aren't even worried about liability, like event planners and people who don't have a high probability of being sued. The other benefit is self-employment tax savings. So if you're a sole proprietorship, you're just operating without a corporation, in addition to income tax, you have to pay self-employment tax on all of your profits that you take home. Everything you take home, whether it's a salary or it's profits. And self-employment tax can be expensive. So the way corporations help you save on self-employment tax is if you are a corporation that's taxed as an S-Corp or an LLC that's taxed as an S-Corp, you can take a small salary. It's got to be a reasonable salary, and I usually recommend talking to an accountant about what's reasonable in your industry. But pay yourself the smallest salary possible and take everything else as owner's draw or profit. And if you do that, then you only pay self-employment tax on the salary you take, and you don't have to pay self-employment tax on the amounts you take as profits. So if you don't use that S-Corp election with the IRS, then you're going to be paying self-employment tax on everything you take home. So what I usually recommend is talk to an accountant. If you're not worried about the liability protection of a corporation and you're only interested in tax savings, talk to an accountant and find out, based on what you think you're going to bring in any given year, whether the fees that it's going to cost to set up a corporation are going to be less than the amount you're going to be saving on self-employment tax by setting up the corporation. And often, if you're actually going to be making money in your business, the savings on self-employment tax are going to be greater than the amount that you're going to pay for annual filing fees with the Secretary of State. So often you're actually saving money by incorporating because you're saving on that self-employment tax. So those are the two big benefits of incorporating: liability protection and savings on self-employment tax. I want to make a distinction now when we talk about what's a better form for you, LLCs or corporations. A lot of people think that the distinction is between S-Corps and LLCs, but that's kind of a false distinction because on the Secretary of State level, when you file your articles of organization, if you're an LLC, or your articles of incorporation, if you're a corporation, you choose between being a corporation or an LLC. And when you do that, you're automatically a C corporation if you're a corporation, and an LLC if you're an LLC. A C corporation is the type of corporation that big companies like Pepsi or GM are. They they haven't filed an S-corp election because they can't, because an S-corp election limits the amount of shareholders you can have, the type of shareholders you can have, and it's really intended for smaller businesses. So on the Secretary of State level, again, you choose between being an LLC or a corporation, and then once you filed your articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State, whether you're an LLC or a corporation, you can then, with the IRS, file something called an S-corp election, which provides added tax benefits if you qualify for it. And you can do that whether you're an LLC or a corporation. So that's why I say it's a false distinction between an S-corp and an LLC, because LLCs, just like corporations, can file that S-corp election with the IRS. And so what an S-corp election does is it provides a couple benefits. One is that LLCs already have pass-through taxation, meaning that they're not you don't pay taxes at the corporate level. The taxes pass through directly to your individual tax returns. But corporations, if you haven't filed an S-corp election, don't have pass-through taxation automatically. So what that means is that you pay income tax. Your corporation pays income taxes on the corporate level before distributing profits to the shareholders, and then the shareholders pay a second income tax on the profits they receive. What an S-corp election tag will do for you is allow you to have pass-through taxation for a corporation, meaning that you don't pay tax at the corporate level. The taxes pass right through to your individual tax returns, and so you're not being double taxed. You're only taxed once. So that's one thing that an S-corp election does. And that's really only a benefit for corporations, not LLCs, because that's automatic for LLCs. But LLCs can benefit from an S-corp election because the second thing it does is it allows you to save on self-employment tax in the way that we discussed earlier. So if you are an LLC that hasn't filed an S-corp election, or a corporation that hasn't filed the S-corp election, and you're employed in your business and that's what you do for a living, just like a sole proprietorship, you're going to pay taxes on all of everything that you take out of the business, whether it's profit or salary, however you want to classify it. But if you file the S-corp election, whether you're an LLC or a corporation, you can then only pay self-employment tax on your salary and take the profits free and clear of that. So that's why LLCs will usually file an S-corp election, because they want to get those self-employment tax savings. So with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the difference between corporations and LLCs. Usually you can talk to 12 different professionals and get 50-50 answers on whether an LLC or an S-corp election is advisable. I usually, for smaller companies with 1 or 2 shareholders, I usually recommend being a corporation taxed as an S-corp rather than an LLC taxed as an S-corp. And here's why. The only real difference between a corporation and an LLC when you've only got a couple of shareholders and you're a mom and pop business is that you've got a couple extra corporate formalities that you have to follow in order to remain in good standing and if you get sued, retain that liability protection. And those corporate formalities are pretty simple. Corporations, unlike LLCs, need initial meeting minutes for shareholders and directors, and you need to do annual meeting minutes of shareholders. And anytime you make a major change, like taking on a huge liability, a big loan, or merging with another company or selling your assets, you need to do a special meeting minutes of the directors, and you need to give notice of those meeting minutes. LLCs are a little bit more flexible. They don't need those initial meeting minutes of shareholders and directors, and if you want to make a major change, you just have to have a email agreement or something in writing between the partners that's a little bit less formal, agreeing to that change. But in all practicality, when you've got a couple of shareholders, all you really have to do is have your attorney prepare, and it doesn't cost very much, prepare meeting minutes that everybody signs off on. And if you're a sole shareholder, you're not actually having a meeting with yourself. You're just having your attorney prepare a form that you sign saying that this meeting happened, and the forms are pretty standard, and it doesn't require a lot of work on your part or your attorney's part. So that's the little extra effort that you have to do if you're a corporation, is to maintain those corporate formalities with meeting minutes. And the upside for an LLC is that you don't have to do that. But the downside for an LLC is that it's more expensive with the Secretary of State. So, for example, in Illinois, the initial filing fee to become an LLC is $500 For a corporation, it's $100. So you're paying $400 more for the luxury of not doing those meeting minutes. Annually, LLCs cost $250 to file your annual report with the Secretary of State, which you have to do to stay in good standing. Corporations cost around $100 to do that. So you're saving $150 every year by being a corporation. They both have the exact same benefits from a liability and tax perspective, as long as you're an LLC taxed as an S corp or a corporation taxed as an S corp. So there's not really any practical difference between an LLC and a corporation, other than the corporation requires these additional meeting minutes to maintain your corporate formalities, and the corporation's a little bit cheaper. So for most of my clients, I'll tell them, an S corp, a corporation taxed as an S corp is a better way to go, because the cost savings the benefit of the cost savings for a corporation outweigh the burden of having to do these meeting minutes, because it's not much of a formality that you have to follow. Now, there are good reasons to do LLCs. As you get more shareholders, as your company gets bigger, sometimes that ease of use will come into play more. So if you've got 5 or 6 people, and you don't want to sign off on meeting minutes and pass those around to 5 or 6 people every time you want to make a major corporate decision, then just having a chain email where everybody votes yes on something, sometimes that becomes worth the extra money they have to pay to the Secretary of State. So for smaller companies with a couple of shareholders, the S corp, the corporation tax as an S corp, it tends to be the better form because it's cheaper. Once you get to a couple more shareholders, the LLC might make more sense because the ease of use is worth that extra money. And then once you get bigger and have a larger shareholder group, or if you're bringing outside investors, then a C corporation, the kind that's taxed twice, once at the corporate level, once on the individual level, starts to make more sense. And that's for a couple reasons. One is there are limitations on who can be an S corp. So if you're growing big enough that your shareholder base, you've got foreign shareholders, you've got other corporations that are shareholders, or you've got more than 100 shareholders. If you can't meet the requirements to be an S corp, and you've grown to that size, then you're going to be a C corp, and that's a better way to go. The other reason that you might want to be a C corporation once you get larger is if you're bringing in outside investors. Outside investors sometimes like to see, and they prefer, the corporate form as opposed to the LLC form, because they like the fact that special notice of shareholder meetings is required, and that you have to have a special shareholder meeting to make major decisions for the corporation, because that provides an extra protection for passive investors. So the rule of thumb is, when you're really small, the corporation tax as an S corp is the way to go. When you get a little bit bigger, being an LLC tax as an S corp is the way to go. And then once you become much larger than that, C corporation is usually your only and best option. But when you have the opportunity to be a corporation taxed as an S corp, that's usually what we recommend. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions for me, you can call O'Flaherty Law at 630-324-6666. And please check out seizeyourbusiness.com, learn-about-law.com, depending on what your interest is, whether it's legal issues or business issues. Learn About Law has a lot of articles and podcasts and video blogs about business law, so if that's your interest, check that out. And my partner for seizeyourbusiness.com couldn't be here today. His name is Jim Wadzak with Success Enhancement, and he teaches people management skills through improv. So you can find his contact info at seizeyourbusiness.com. Thanks so much for listening.